Welcome to Chapter 2 of the Hiring Chronicles, our independent podcast that's dedicated to digging into the real stories in the world of TA. Although our paychecks will bear the Smart Recruiters logo, our views, opinions, and the classic Davo moments that you will come to love, I promise, are completely unaffiliated with them. So speakers up, it's time to jump in. We hope that you enjoy this chapter just as much as we enjoyed recording it. And don't forget to subscribe.
Sound checks.
We'll wait until these two stop.
Just, taken over.
Sorry. Anyway, welcome to Chris and Lindsay's podcast.
We can actually start like that.
Really good intro.
Yeah, with Amy and David.
So basically, Greene King are taking over today.
That's right. I think that's a good way to start, isn't it? I can't believe it. If you are joining us, welcome to the Hiring Chronicles. You've already heard our guests from Greene King have joined us today. Who have we got our names?
We have got Lindsey Stone and Chris Bailey. So two massive key players as part of the Greene King HR transformation process. Massive. Which we will hopefully find out a little bit more around your backgrounds and some of the things that they got into throughout the journey as well.
That's right. And if anybody's watched the trailer so far, they will know that actually the continuity of this is a little bit out of kilter. Because, well, first of all, one of our guests isn't recognisable. But
Absolutely
secondly,
not.
they're in a different place, different location.
Different nail colour. Let's just point that out.
Different nail colour. So we apologise if you have watched the trailer and you're trying to figure out what's going on. But in terms of today's chapter, we thought it would be great to hear from Greene King because you probably know them as a business. But what you might not know is the transformation that they've been through. So we've worked with them personally and we've got to know them for the best part of a year. But we were also part of a big project that they've still got ongoing. And we want to share with the audience how they went about it, what kind of strategies they put in place. Did they get a wide team involved? What goes into rolling out a new tech stack? And really learn from the best.
And also what went wrong. What really happened.
Yeah, what mistakes happened.
Yeah.
So it's good to have you on the show, guys. Welcome back.
Welcome.
It's great to be back.
I think that the first time we recorded this, it was about 40 degrees in the studio and we were all sweltering.
It
It was about 40 degrees outside as well, I think.
Yeah.
And that was the first time kind of getting here. So the journey was a bit crazy and Ubers, but hopefully a bit more smoother today.
Yeah, I hope
It
so.
was.
Yes.
So, Lindsay, let's start with you. Can you give the listeners, the viewers, a 30-second Lindsey Stone background as to who you are and how you came to Greene King?
30 seconds.
Well,
Okay.
let's have
We
a
are
minute.
timing you.
Shall we have a
kids.
minute? Give her a minute.
So I've been in recruitment for around 15 years, traditional ex-agency route, and I went into an organisation at first in Royal Mail, helping out with things like apprenticeships, recruitment, and starting to think about how we shaped like new graduate schemes. And I was really lucky that I went through my career getting a couple of breaks where you got to roll out new initiatives and programs, and that's been a bit of a theme. So I went on to M&S and I was able to help them with landing video interviews, and also think about how we changed the process there, how we recruited. And then it's a really funny story. I wanted to go to Berlin because that's where my friend is, and I couldn't get a job in Berlin because everyone wanted IT recruitment, and I had no experience there. So I ended up in the Netherlands. I jumped.
That's a different country, Linz.
Yeah, completely different country. And I went working for NATO, like different sector, leading their transformation there for their TA team. So when I arrived, it was like recruitment services and very much administrative, and starting to figure out like the HR operating model and how talent acquisition shapes what they needed to recruit cybersecurity professionals. So that was a really cool job.
So
Really
you went,
great.
wait, hold on a second.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, no. You've already failed the 1 minute task, but you went from M&S to NATO. How on earth do you get from one of those roles to the next? Because surely NATO's like really intense to get a role there. And I know you probably can't talk too much about it, but based on what you can say, like how difficult was that process?
So I flew out to Brussels after doing a video interview with them. So they use some really cool tech that's video interviewing to get the best out of recruiting from 29 nations.
Just casually flying out to somewhere
flew me out
to for an
to Brussels.
interview, you know.
Lovely. Interesting fact, I was actually a few days pregnant at the time. Didn't know that at that point. And the security clearance takes so long, I ended up having a baby whilst waiting for my security clearance to come through, and Freya arrived. So we ended up moving and into a completely different world. I thought I was going to go there to get the IT experience. Like, I was so excited. I'm working for NATO. Like, it's where the real cool stuff is, yeah. What I got actually was proper like international experience in recruiting and leading teams. Like, it was hard work there to lead a team because they're driven by a lot of policies and processes. That's fair, but it's hard work. So I think I went through like a 4-panel interview, and I was definitely sweating when I left that interview. But
I would be.
did a presentation, got the job, and then had to move countries with a 10-week-old baby. So
Easy.
That was a bit wacky. Won't do that again.
That's an episode in itself, I think.
I have so many questions.
Yeah, just having kids anyway is hard enough. But yeah, wow. And then you've ended up at Greene King. How's that transpired?
So the contract at NATO was a 3-year contract, and 2 years in, we'd completed the transformation, and I could tell that I was missing customer environment. Like, government just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I love something that you can talk about, frontline teams that's experience based. So I thought, right, I'm either going to go back into retail or I'm going to try something different. And I landed a super job at PVH, which is Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein. I was their TA director for Europe. And I worked there for 2 years, and unfortunately COVID happened. Like, me and my husband had a agreement. If you press the buzzer, we go home. And he pressed the buzzer.
He pressed it first.
pressed
When I was in the job that I loved, he pressed the buzzer.
Oh, awkward.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, did you just? That was it because he pressed it. That was almost
the
your
deal we had.
That was the deal.
He was really lonely. He was like, "Oh my gosh, nobody's flying out to see me anymore." Like, we're going home, Lindsay. So
Should we get the other side of the story, maybe from Mr. Stone?
Like, there might have been some difficult conversations at home.
I'm hoping that's not like a spoiler alert. He does know that was the reason, doesn't he? Press the buzzer. You haven't just told us, all right.
Yeah.
He's going to find out when he watches this.
That is not what happened, Lindsay.
All because of him, because he pressed the buzzer.
While you were at Greene King, my husband forced it.
So that was a bit weird, right? Like, who goes looking for a job when they're in the job they love? Like, that was really hard.
Yeah, that
for
is
me.
really hard.
So I was quite picky. I was like, I know I want to stay in customer sector. It has to be something that challenges me. Like, every role, I've had some really meaty projects that I've delivered, and I think I don't think that it's because they land with me. I think I'm attracted to companies that say, this is what we need you to deliver. This is something big, it's complex, it's new, it's shiny. What can you do? So I needed something that would challenge me. And Greene King at first, I was like, oh, not sure. I didn't really feel like it was big enough. And then when I started talking to them and realised how huge we are as an organisation, I was like, hold on, this doesn't make sense. Hold on, you've got like 1,600 pubs, 1,000 tenanted and leased pubs. We've got restaurants and hotels. It blows my mind.
30,000 employees, or even more?
Like, it's not my fun fact, so copyright to Vincent in the hotel team that said this on social media at some point. We've got more sites than KFC's, Pret, and McDonald's.
I was going to say, I wanted to
I was
say
looking at Chris.
McDonald's.
And I'm like,
BA.
what?
Yeah, but go and Google it.
In the UK?
Yeah.
In the UK.
Oh, let's
Not
caveat that.
worldwide,
In
Go
the
Google
UK.
it.
Wow, I still though.
Yeah, that's
there's
still,
like-
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like 4 or 5 McDonald's in the town that I live in.
Yeah, McDonald's are blatantly
And
coming
how many
for
Greene
this
King
show.
pubs are there in the town?
But yeah,
You
but
don't know.
even when you walk past the pub though, you don't realise that it's
You don't realise.
necessarily
You
a
don't.
Greene King, do you?
No.
So I thought that was a bit of a
That
pull
is a
for me.
fun
I
fact.
was like, how do I not know the size of this organisation? Like, clearly there wasn't a good brand, or there wasn't an articulated brand that as a candidate I was going, I want to work there. Because if McDonald's had come knocking, I'd have been like, oh, I want to work there. I know
Yeah.
what McDonald's is. And then they had a really unusual structure. So it's since COVID, they put a matrix structure in, didn't they? Yep. So we've got a number of divisions where the different resourcing teams sit out in those HR functions, and it makes it a bit complicated. I have a group hat on. They don't report to me, but I'm accountable for group strategy. And I thought, well, let's give it a try. Let's see if I can lead teams when they don't report into me. That's what we did.
And I think one of your first hires was your colleague and our other guest. Is that right? Chris was one of the first hires. What brought that about?
Yeah, so I quite quickly noticed. I arrived to a plan on 2 extra headcount for employer branding and technology, and 2 extra headcount over here. Like, it wasn't really clearly defined on what we needed, and I realised if we were going to get the technology in place, I needed somebody that had a real specialism in what you see out there now as TA operations. And I've had it in 3 roles, actually. So I inherited a role in NATO that had technology in the role. I thought it was a bit odd at first, but it was in the structure. And then I saw what it can do. Mm-hmm. At PVH, I put that role in, and then at Greene King, I put that role in. And my brief to Chris when we interviewed was, I don't want a recruiter. I don't want a project manager. I need somebody that can do technology and cut through like efficiencies of process and really see how we drive different approaches.
Right.
Enter Chris.
Enter Chris Bailey.
Yeah. So,
2 stone later.
Yes.
You 2 look incredible.
Lighter, actually.
Yeah, well, yeah.
2 stone lighter.
2 stone lighter,
2
yeah.
stone later. Yeah, that's true.
You do look incredible since we last saw you. It's like just a different person.
Thank you.
You looked incredible beforehand.
Well, yeah,
like,
you do. Like,
or Chris.
Clearly not.
Sorry.
Clearly not.
Sorry, but like, hard work pays off. So well done.
Thank you.
But who is Chris Bailey?
Less international travel than Lindsey, and to get to Greene King, much less.
You would have got to Berlin. You've got IT and tech experience.
Quite possibly.
You were the hire they needed.
Never tried, but quite possibly. So for me, I've been in technology for about 20 years, and I would say of the last 10, 12 years within recruitment tech or HR tech, and I have worked as that kind of RPO, kind of doing that kind of recruitment roles early days for kind of joining recruitment, but it's always been around kind of that technology side of it. So it was things like National Grid and Elsevier in terms of the technology and kind of what we can land with that. That then moved over to working with a lot more red tape within NHS and again, rolling out kind of recruitment technology, looking at what they can bring in kind of internally. And then kind of this was all very much as kind of consultant, kind of contracting, kind of up and down the country. Got to the point where I don't want to do this anymore. We've got a kind of 6-month-old son at home. And I'm thinking, let's try and be a little bit more centered. Let's try and find something that doesn't involve up and down the country, doesn't involve multiple clients, different contracts on a monthly, weekly basis. So then I ended up going to Ocado. Joined Ocado, and when I joined, it was very much around, can we look at centralizing our recruitment operations from a technology point of view, from a process point of view, from everything, to the point that when I joined, they had 3 different ATS systems.
3?
Yep.
Why did they have 3?
They're smaller than Greene King, right?
That's why I'm like, why?
So they had one that would do all of their technology recruitment, one that would do all of their non-technology but head office recruitment, and then they had a custom-built ATS which would do all of their volume hires, so their like warehouse operatives and drivers. But with that also meant that at the time they had 3 different career sites. So they would have the Ocado Technology career site, what would have been like the Ocado Group or Ocado Careers website, and then Ocado.jobs, which again, so it was 3 different
this
sites.
Would give James like
so it was like,
there was
no. But then that also meant then very similar to when you joined at Greene King, it was divisional recruitment teams. You had one recruitment team that would report into a HR director. You had another recruitment team that would report into the head of shared services. You had another recruitment team that would report into the head of HR for technology.
So very fragmented.
Yeah, massively. So it took me honestly about 6 to 9 months to really kind of get under the skin to understand the whole concept around what we're trying to do. The initial pain points were felt in the volume piece, because that was the bit that was probably costing the business at the time more money. So if you think of Ocado and how they make their money, it's being able to fulfill the order. So the orders coming in was never a problem. Fulfilling the orders, having enough people to be able to pick the orders and deliver the orders, that is what was going to obviously cost the money and certainly drive up the revenue. So that was that immediate pain point that was coming in from the top. So, okay, what can we do with this team? And then how then can we learn from that to roll that out into the wider teams? We then kind of fast forward, I was there for almost about 4 years, and then got to the point where the reason I joined is because I wanted something central and we'd have to have the opportunity of being a bit closer to home. I ended up working 4 days a week, 100 miles away from home, being part of site setup in Erith, which is 160 miles away from home.
And you were working away, but you didn't want
working in Andover, which is 140 miles away from home. So I'm like, this didn't quite pan out very well.
You're not very good at this, Chris.
No,
let's be
it's
honest.
still far from it.
Did you have a buzzer? Because you could have called that buzzer at that time.
No, I didn't have a buzzer. No, I didn't. And I should have had a buzzer.
Let's hear about how Lindsey
Definitely
convinced you to leave all these great brands.
We fast
Because
forward.
you weren't looking, were you?
No, I wasn't looking. So I was not looking at all. And immediately I'm thinking, hospitality is not the right sector to join
Right.
after COVID. It clearly can't be. This company, after shutting so many of their pubs, cannot possibly have made a profit, cannot possibly be cash rich, must be a not disaster waiting to happen, but thinking along those lines of, actually, is this going to offer me that job security?
I remember the headhunter
like,
saying
wow.
to me, like, I'm not sure Chris is in.
Yeah.
I don't think he really does want to come for an interview. And I was like, let's just get him on a call. Let's just have a
and
chat.
it was that kind of thought process, kind of speaking with it at the time. I was like, there was reservations. But then after speak again, it was the same kind of story. You speak to Lindsey and you speak to who was HRD at the time. And again, it was, you just kind of fall in love with that whole process. And maybe that's my problem. Maybe I fall in love too quickly. I don't know. But I certainly did.
How
again.
did you do it, Lynn?
I certainly did again.
What are your secrets?
How did you get into
Because
fall in love?
you're taking someone that's not really looking at all.
Yeah.
But you said like you've got I'm telling the headhunter, keep pushing.
Yeah.
Why? Like what was it that made you want to keep pushing to get a conversation with Chris?
So we had two hires that were really instrumental at the same time, Chris and James, who does talent attraction and employer branding. And for both of them, equally the pitch, as I say, is completely different. And when I had a conversation with Chris, at first we just had a chat about what did you like in your last role? Like I talked to my team so much about like if you're not happy in work, if you're not excited to get out of bed in the morning for work, you're in the wrong job. Stop working.
James
Stop
came from
working
hospitality, didn't he?
Yeah,
James knew hospitality. He'd just done several years at M&B and came from M&B to join Greene King.
But you
I'm
were
brand new to
completely
it.
fresh.
Brand new to hospitality. Never worked in retail, but never worked in that hospitality sector. So that was the decision maker for me. The decision maker wasn't, do I join Greene King? If Greene King and what they'd pitched to me and what they explained to me, what the strategy is over the next kind of 3 to 5 years was another sector, in a heartbeat, yes. The thought process was, do I join a hospitality company?
And when we had our conversation, I think I leaned into the HR transformation. That was the bit that was the sales pitch. So even before my time, there was already a decision from a broader strategy perspective at Greene King that we were going to go through some cultural shifts from a people focus. And we were also going to look at the HR landscape, the technology and the experience of our people managers within the business. One component of that was obviously talent acquisition technology. And when I came into Greene King, I was so surprised at like the amount of things that we would need to go after, and knew that if I positioned it right with Chris about here's the direction of travel, this is like a 5-year transformation program, we're going to make a pitch to go first with talent acquisition and drop some of those, I think I think for you, it was the bits that made you go, that really excites me because I can do that.
Oh, yeah,
so we talked a lot about like how you get a good business case in place. How can we challenge the timeline? Because at first we were going to go at the end. We were going to go in like 2026, 2027. And I was like, that can't happen. This recruitment team that's working here is like in a horrible situation where they were like, nobody's listening to us because of the transformation.
So let's dig into that then, because we know the transformation that you're currently still in, that you're going through, but just give us a sense of the starting point. So you're talking about a 5-year transformation.
Yeah.
Why? What do you need to change at that point in time that needs to drive change all through your HR tech and all through your processes?
So I think for us as an organisation, we have what I'd class as like 1,600 mini businesses on their own. The pubs are like their own devolved setup.
Mm-hmm.
And the opportunity we have from a transformation perspective and the complexity is that we've got to get processes aligned, we've got to get the right experience set up for how and what they use, because they will always go with the place that's the easiest to use. Like, they're busy.
They'll always go to that path of least resistance, but there's so much to go at. It's when you join Greene King, you see that it's that blank canvas. So I think that 5-year roadmap, even 5 years, is quite ambitious when you look at what's on that roadmap and what we need to achieve, because of the scale of how it needs to be achieved and the scale of where it needs to be rolled out to. And I think the way we've put that together, whilst it is ambitious, it's definitely doable. But it's 5 years for a reason. Because if we just said, "Oh yeah, we're going to do this in 2 years," everyone will be like, "No, you're not." If anyone that's worked in that sector for 5 minutes would be like, "No, you're not." 5 years, yes.
It's
we
interesting.
kind of added to the timeline because we went first. So they're just starting to do HCM development, kick-off of the wider transformation, and HR ready, which is about like processes, org structures, etc. But we took a lot of the investment from the transformation team to get the talent acquisition suite in place.
It's when you dig deeper into Greene King and you realise some of our current processes and what our current technology is like. So for me, it's certainly coming from that geek side now, and you look at the kind of the data that we hold at the moment, you then realise, actually, there's a 6-month project just to cleanse that data to make sure what's moving across to a new system adds value. Otherwise, you're just doing dirty out, dirty in. And it's not until you start unravelling some of those layers that you then find that.
It's interesting, actually, because a lot of customers or companies that we will speak to, when we say this is like the typical timeline for an implementation, they're like, "That's really long. Like, can't you do it quicker?"
Yeah.
But then when you look at the wider scale of things, it needs to be that long for the quality of the delivery.
Yeah.
The biggest risk in any timeline is the business, and that's 100% what I didn't consider in the complexity of like the general manager pub population. I think we originally thought we'd go live in January or February for experience hires.
Huge lessons learned in terms of the Smart Recruiters project. We kind of were looking at, okay, this is the time scale from kind of A to B, and the full project, if kind of splitting it up, is probably might end at E or F or something. But A to B, experienced hires. You then, as you then start the project, you then unravel that just experienced hires alone, which we are classing as salary paid workers, they have one defined process of how they are recruited, one defined process sort of in terms of how they're onboarded and contracts are issued.
Yep.
In theory, you would think that would be quite straightforward. You then unravel the layers and you find out actually that's 3 different businesses. Because you have got what we class as that kind of corporate head office approach and the way of recruiting. You've then got the pub-based ways of recruiting across 1,600. And of course, that does need to be a different process. And it's not until you start unraveling you realise that. And then you've got what's our brewing and brands division, which is very much kind of our warehousing and our bottling. And again, that is another different way of recruiting and another different kind of process. It's almost like a mini volume process, but because they're salaried, they're onboarded in the same way. So when you unravel that you think, well, actually, just in theory, that could actually add 3 times as much work involved, and it did. It kind of, we had to split it then up into phases. So that project, instead of just one experienced hires, was split into let's do corporate, then let's do pubs, and then let's do brewing and brands.
Was there any alignment across the 3 of them though? Because where you're saying they're all, is the end goal?
Yeah,
almost to bring them all together. Like, what's
exactly that? Yeah,
I think you asked me before about like what did we do, what did we set up with things, and Chris's role when I pitched him about the job was coming in to be like the technical lead, like rallying the troops. Are we in this together, and keep them true to what we're trying to build. I had to do a bit of the like hearts and minds as well, and because they didn't report it into me, we had to start at a base of, well, what are we actually going after outside of technology? So we came together in a resourcing community with all of the senior leaders in the talent acquisition teams. we went into a room for 2 days. We co-created a strategy on how we attract, select, onboard and grow talent. And we started to think about, like, where do we want to be? Like, what's the vision in 4 years' time for us? What does good look like? And I didn't just turn up and say, this is how we're going to do it. We did it together. And then the bit that Chris spotted when we looked at their voice in what we'd co-created for the strategy was, there was, I think on all of them, there was technology enabling
technology was the enabler on the
So that was our
everyone.
driver.
On the whole community, it was all listed as technology,
It
right?
was holding them back so much.
But had they identified, like, they're specifying like technology is holding them back? Now we know that you're overhauling quite a lot of technology, but did you have the discussion of, well, do we go with like ATS or HRIS first? Like,
Absolutely.
if
So
you had that discussion,
was-
how did you make the decision which way to go?
So we went out to market to look at vendors across both. So we were trying to make sure we did best in breed and best in class. We wanted to be really specific around the requirements of, we need to go early with this. Like, there was a burning platform, we're not recruiting well, and the pubs needed us to get a better setup, better tech stack in place. The conversation was difficult. Like, we had to go through a series of selection processes and prove out actually that for some of the standalone talent acquisition suites that they gave us far more than we needed. And it would mean that it would strengthen what we have from a revenue perspective now. So I lean into all of that conversation was, what does it give the pubs? That was always the driver on the requirements. And I still, to this day, stand by that as our biggest USP against some of our competitors.
Oh, definitely.
Because we're not using just HRIS. We're using something that connects to a CRM. We're using something that connects to our career sites where we can be really agile. And like, we've got our first seasonal campaign with a talent pool on our career site. Like, this is amazing. we wouldn't have had that if we'd have waited, gone with HRIS and been at the end at 2026, 2027, whenever that would come.
And did you make that decision kind of as a core team, or who did you
It was
bring
the
in to
program
kind of
team.
sway the ITs
So
or
that was
whoever
quite.
it is?
I think that was, again, I think very transformational in terms of how we approach that. It wasn't a selection of here's the HR and the recruitment team making that decision. We had kind of program managers from transformation. We had IT involved. We had kind of key
Had a
stakeholders
solutions
from
architect.
finance,
Yeah.
solution architects
All
involved.
together,
Yeah,
all in
yeah.
this community.
all together as
Yeah.
part of this community.
In the meeting, deciding
that
what
were in
we were
these
going to do.
meetings, that were also as part of the kind of vendor demos and the scoring. So they were all doing that. So they would have a scoring and an approach based on maybe on their business area, and that's absolutely great that they do that. They would have a scoring based on their recruitment knowledge, and that may only be as a hiring manager, but that's great that they do that. And then you'd have some that actually, do you know what, I've been in HR, I've been in recruitment, and I've scored it like that. So then we could collectively make a really informed decision on what is the right approach. Do we wait 2-3 years, or do we go now? And we made that then as a key program team.
And me and Chris knew what we needed when we walked into that meeting. That meeting was tough because we got asked questions around, and remember the structure. So corporate reporting to me, the pubs recruiters didn't, right? Did we just go live with corporate then, Lindsay? And we were like,
Oh, no, we were like, we don't do it at all.
I've just-
Straight away, we don't do it at all.
we were like, no.
Yeah.
Like, we've sat in a room and co-created a strategy. We've got these teams with us. We're not just going to switch it on for corporate now. We could have done. We could have said yes. Lots of other
we could
companies have done that.
Yeah.
But we went,
You
no,
and I looked at
it's
each
everything.
other and we just said, neither of us are comfortable going to our pub recruitment teams and say, sorry, you're not getting the new technology that this team is getting. So we were like, it's all
The
or
kickoff
nothing.
would have been massive.
Yeah, it's
I
all or
don't
nothing.
But it also must have been like, for me, if I was in a meeting and I'm sharing that meeting and I'm a recruiter and I've got you as IT sat there, it would drive me mental, the questions that IT would ask in a vendor presentation. Be like, why is that important to my recruitment project? Did that happen? Was that a thing?
You tell us, you were on those days.
I think
Don't reveal the secret.
Is that a leading question?
in the
though?
moment from them demos.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah. So I won't lie. I spoke to my boss at the time and said, I'm getting a little bit frustrated that people that aren't functional experts are giving an opinion on something they don't understand. Like, I can't go and give an opinion on IT or other areas of the business. Like, help me out. And I said to my boss, help me out so that I get the right messaging. And actually, my boss is really good at reminding me that I don't have to do things on my own. Sometimes I think this is all on Lindsay, like Chris will joke, all roads lead to Lindsay, and that makes me feel a bit of pressure sometimes. And she was like, go and have a chat to them outside of the meetings. Like, she always says to me, like, invest in your relationships. And that was the difference. Like, some of the people that may have been there, I don't understand it, or saying things that don't make sense, I had to kind of be a bit of a politician and go and, like, win them round.
Yeah.
And how did you do that, though? Like, what kind of conversations? Were you almost just explaining the benefits, explaining the impact of if we don't do this with a core
explaining
ATS?
recruitment.
Yeah, because so many conversations that we have, you do get IT join, and IT are like, no, we need to go with our, HRIS system. Yeah. And then you get the recruiters like, but we want something that's good for us.
Something decent.
Solution that's nice and simple. It is. And I think that's why that's why Lindsay has those conversations, because if it's me, it would just be back off, it doesn't involve you.
But you need that as well.
Yeah, we had to do a little bit of myth busting around our current product and like what actually is great looking like out there, and that sometimes just meant having a conversation like, oh, what do you see, what worries you, and I am always the person that will jump in and sell something and be able to say why we do it. For a long time in that series of meetings, I had to sit and listen when I didn't like what they were saying until I can figure out actually what is the route in for me to get them on board. And I sometimes wonder if actually our secret was we put together a really good business case for the decision on Go First, but I sometimes wonder if it was our message on, no, we don't do it for corporate, because we were really clear on the broad business benefits.
Okay.
And I think in that room, that probably resonated that this isn't Lindsey and Chris's agenda, because if it was, we'd have said, just put it in for corporate.
Yeah, we'd have said, yeah, go on, and then we'll try and weave it in somewhere else later. But no, far from. I think I've been quite fortunate where I've been on kind of both sides of the fence in meetings like that. So I kind of do get to see sometimes, not always, but sometimes kind of where the IT kind of expertise is coming from in those calls, or where the solution architect is coming from, and some of the questions that they're asking. So I kind of understand, well, that's where it adds value to them. They start talking about the security side of it, and they start talking about kind of the data protection. Well, is that the type of conversation?
You're good at that, actually. You're good at like talking their world.
That's what it means for them. That's what's important to them. That's what they need to know. So, do you know what? If they just need to be heard and understand, okay, that ticks that box, I'm quite happy, I can move on to the next one. And then when I was speaking to some of those, certainly with the solution architect, yes, that's what that's what was important to him. He needed to know that, yes, it ticks that box, because in 12 months' time, I'm not going to have a problem or someone kind of ringing me or kind of virtually knocking on my door saying, you've agreed as part of this program team to put this system in, but they haven't met our DPIA kind of record. So I get that he wants to know that early on, because then he can turn around and say, great, it meets my needs.
Yeah.
I don't know if it meets yours, but you're the expert to find out if it meets your needs.
So maybe it's more of just bringing in the IT's requirement, because if we were talking about IT, they've got their requirements of like integrations.
Yes, of course.
Is it secure and all of that kind of stuff?
Like
it's more
verification processes. All of that is
more
the sweet
focusing
spot
to
for
their world, rather than like dedicated sessions to their world, rather than.
But other businesses don't have what Lindsay has. Like, this might be a bit derogatory, but Chris is almost a cog. But not cog. I said with the G.
You're going to get us cancelled before we've even started.
The subtitles are going to have a field day on that. But like, so many TA leaders or heads of recruitment run these projects, then they bring in IT. There's such a disconnect, but it's almost like you've leveraged Chris as a go-between between recruitment, IT, uniting it all together, supporting you with the community.
Yeah.
Other people don't do that. Like, they really don't do it, and their projects get canned.
And they
it is
probably
the
don't have
HRIS
the
that gets
resource
rolled
that
out.
we had around it. Like it's not just Chris in this project. Like we were super spoiled because this is part of the HR transformation. So we had a program manager, a project manager, a business analyst, a comms and change lead, implementation SME, and then all the SMEs that are across the business. Like this was like the biggest type of investment of resource I've ever seen. But what we got from it, the uniqueness is Chris's superpower is understanding the tech overlaying a recruitment landscape. And then we had somebody that we brought into the comms and change role, which was Steph, who used to be an IT recruiter in our team. And that really helped. Bringing somebody into the team, I've put it on the lessons learned actually for next week, bringing somebody in a change and comms role that has some type of functional knowledge and understanding. Whilst it's been tough for us to navigate how we get things out to the business, you're on a starting point.
You are massively. Yeah,
It's
you are.
easier.
Well, I think you just get it, don't you?
You do.
If you've been in the TA or the recruitment world,
Yep.
you tend to just kind of get the pains and you get the messaging that needs to go out, I think.
Yeah.
You do get it, but I think convincing some of the senior execs as well is another level. Like the business impact, people don't always look at an ATS implementation and think, oh, what's that going to deliver to Greene King? Like,
They don't normally understand it.
No,
Like,
no,
I hate
they don't.
to
They don't.
patronise, but at board level, they don't normally understand what it really unlocks. Like people is the biggest driving force behind your business. If you're not recruiting with the right technology, you're just not going to drive your revenues up. And that's where we had to get the hook with the board, isn't it? We had two pre-reads for the resourcing strategy that we served them up. One was a really old one, the Virgin Media case study on like impact on revenue,
Yep.
which it always is really good in for the board. And then the second was a paper that I think it was out with Deloitte that did a direct correlation to how mature your team in TA and your technology is. It'll have like a 20% accelerator on your revenues. And sometimes people just think we're filling jobs. Like how many times do we hear we're just filling jobs?
yeah, undervaluing TA.
hard.
So we had another guest, I can't remember whether it was David Brammer or Dominic Joyce, but one of them said TA is one of the only divisions that other people think they can do as well. Like they can just run it.
everyone's a recruitment expert.
Yeah,
It is.
everybody.
Everybody is a
Yeah.
recruitment expert. Everyone. Do you know what? In my job, I hire 30 people a month, and they just think they're a recruitment expert. And everyone knows that if you put an advert in the paper, you'll get 100 applications. It's kind of going back from kind of 20, 30 years ago, and everyone thinks that
They can do it.
that they can do it. They can. And I think, and touching on what you were saying there around getting that exec buy-in, I think for me at Greene King, it was like a breath of fresh air kind of coming into a setup that was like that, because there were huge lessons learned for me at a previous company. And I would happily say it's kind of at the works, was that setup wasn't there. Now, it wasn't there because the team isn't as big. It was in the middle of COVID. There was obviously all stores were shut, so the kind of in terms of the budget side of it, of course, there was a number of kind of monetary reasons as to why that kind of headcount wasn't going to be there, and trying to roll this out kind of or trying to implement a TA solution whilst in the middle of COVID, whilst all stores are shut, is one thing.
That sounds like lots of fun.
No, it wasn't. Absolutely far from it. And way too many mistakes happened as a result. But that comes down to, and it's things that I've said to Lindsey before in terms of other projects that we try and land, mini projects, is you've got one person trying to be too many people. If you've got somebody you give them a 40-hour working week full-time job, making something that they are head of learning and development. And then you say, I want you to go and roll out this whole new strategy on how we're going to deliver learning at Greene King. Completely making this up, but I want you to go and deliver this. So you've got to be a project lead, you've got to be an SME, you've got to then maybe be a bit of a business analyst, you've definitely got to do change and comms and how you communicate that to the business. You've got to do all of that as well as your 40-hour job that we pay you for and we've employed you for.
Yeah, people don't realise
And
that.
they don't realise that. And when there's no kind of centralised structure behind that, that is when projects will fail. And that was probably the biggest learning curve.
You're right with that, because what we had in our favour was time.
Yeah.
So I think for people that don't have the luxury of a transformation team and a broader HR programme, like put your effort into your timeline of how you're developing your strategy, how you're building your business case, who do you need to get signing things off before you're even at a sign-off point.
And who would you go to there, Lindsay? Who would you go to for the sign-off before you go for sign-off?
So my top two are always the chief people officer, couldn't even say that, and finance. Like if you can't get finance on board, when you go to the change, whatever it is, there'll be a change board or a committee. To a certain extent, you need IT there as well, but ultimately, you've got the person who's holding the purse strings, and you've got the person that's holding like the people strategy, experience, and how it feels, and like our employer.
And it's good. And at that exec level, we kind of have those pre-read sessions with this chief people officer and with finance. So they never kind of go to those meetings not knowing what to expect. They have been through it once or maybe even twice before, and then then that they're on side. And that approach and how that is handled at Greene King, again, it all kind of cements and kind of just works so much better.
And when you guys are saying pre-reads, you're saying that you're almost taking the execs or the people in those meetings before the actual meeting. So like you say, they know, they kind of know what's coming, so you don't even need to really go into...
They exactly probably ripped the business case to bits and told us what isn't missing before when we're even in that meeting. Like, and it's not from a bad place, it's from a great place. Like we have a really supportive board that wanted to make sure we landed this transformation.
Which is great.
Not everyone has that. And we're the start of the HR transformation. So our chief people officer was really invested in, let's do this right. Yeah. So giving the time for people to feel like they've got input, to critique, like share bits of info where you've not connected it to broader strategies will help you. And what we got from the board was actually a big push for them to say, well, what does this mean to the Greene King business strategy? Like, where does it sit? What does it give us?
And what did you say there? What does it bring to Greene King in terms of the business strategy?
So we have a clear directive into being able to stand out as an employer of choice. Everyone says it, right? That's what everyone's going for. So that wasn't our main strapline. Our main strapline was customer first. Our biggest lead in is candidate as a customer, and I stand by it now. I still really believe that if we can shave off a couple of days in our hourly paid roles, we've done some cool calculations. We think there's like a 4 million revenue growth opportunity there. That's the stuff they want to know.
That's crazy.
They don't care about the stuff that I want to talk about. Oh, it's got really good CRM and you can put talent pool in it. They're like,
why not?
Yeah.
Come on.
Some do. I do remember going to the exec board, kind of the final exec board, and the marketing representation was said straight away is, oh, this is great. How can we leverage this in terms of putting some kind of marketing campaign to all the candidates that apply to say,
actually, it's their world
they're more
isn't it?
visionary,
So
creative.
immediately,
Yeah.
so that was the first thing they thought of. So it was a yes, but how can we do this? And we're like, one step at a time.
Calm down.
So customer first was a big one, and the second is around our culture transformation. So Greene King have been going through a journey of shifting from being very financial led, which is quite contradictory to what I just said, to being people focused. And thinking about how we drive like everyday inclusion. So we really leaned into, okay, this is going to help unlock some of your barriers for how we hire diverse talent, how we make sure we've got enough actual diverse talent in the funnel. Like we couldn't even see any of this before. So the board have got an I&D strategy in place that we couldn't help before. We couldn't be instrumental in it because we didn't have the right processes and tech stack. So tying it to customer first, tying it to the I&D agenda, and being really clear on, actually, this makes sense from a financial perspective. Our investment and where we already are on some of the benefits realisation was a no-brainer.
And how do you then go to, so like you've got your business case, you've identified those kind of key successes that you want to get, but how do you then go and find the right vendor for that? So you've got all of these boxes that you need to tick.
So
where do you do you start with the?
So
What a question.
I hadn't heard of Smart Recruiters at all before we went through this process. One of my close friends uses it, and maybe I ignore him when he talks to me about it. But I didn't know. Like,
It's not your husband, is it?
No. Lovely, but yeah, probably you'll say it does feel like I ignore him. I reached out to IT actually. So this is a weird connection on how we use the teams around us. IT have some great insights platforms that they use, and one of them is Gartner, and it brings up like the different progressive technology, a bit like the Fosway grid, shows you like where the right technology is. Also compares it to HRIS, and we basically, like, I wrote down a list where I thought we'd go, and then we looked at the top right and we said these are all the ones we should bring in, and I think we had about 10. It was quite big.
Yeah, the long list was. Yeah.
So you start with 10, you bring them into a pretty extensive process, because obviously we were a part of this. It was very thorough. There was a lot of data. There was a lot of, we want to see this, this and this. You don't have to big us up. Obviously we were successful, but what kind of turns you off about a vendor that pitches their solution to Greene
Anything
King?
that's just basic and vanilla. Like, if you're telling me what anyone else would hear, it's not gonna fly.
it's not.
Like,
When you say basic and vanilla, things that are just like the standard stuff, things
It
that
is.
aren't customized to
It is,
Greene
and
King.
it is.
what-
It's that. So it's the ones that we've got X number of clients in the same sector as you, so we know how your business works. No, you don't. Trust me.
Oh my God.
We work here,
Chris,
and we don't know how our own business works. So come on, if you do, after spending 5 minutes researching us, and because you work with other clients in the same sector, please enlighten us.
It's amazing though, because there's so many people that do believe that because we've got 1,000 people in hospitality, we're good at it. But actually, the reality is it's a load of nonsense, because you could have 1,000 really angry people that have made a mistake and they're waiting for the contract to die down. But people are still approaching these projects and still going in, right, I want to know businesses of our size, which is fair enough, but our industry. And it's like, well, every business in hospitality is slightly
and
different.
it's one size
course
fits
they are.
all then, isn't it? So when I say
Exactly.
vanilla, I don't want to just see like, what's your core product that fits us into the same space as everyone else. What we did is and you'll remember it, we sent some use cases. So we had a really big grid that we were scoring behind on: requirements, design principles.
Was that built out of the
functionality.
community, what they'd asked for as well? How had you constructed
It
those
was
scenarios?
built with the transformation team with input from the community. So the design principles are not ours. We don't own them. That's the design principles for the whole of the HR transformation. So one of them is based on user experience. One of them is based on like data capture and how we use data. The functionality was based on the community, and the use cases came from then. Like, let's give some really tough use cases of, we recruit this many apprenticeships per year and in multi-geographic locations, or we have 1,600 general managers who are basically recruiters and will do what you want, where they want. Like we had to give a bit of a, who are we and what are our problems?
And let the vendors build that into their solution.
Yeah.
And we had to be quite honest, because of our HRIS transformation, where we will land will be phenomenal, but we're not there yet. So
No,
we
we're
don't
not.
have the plugins that you might
And there
normally
is
have to
there's
a
an element
HRIS.
of expecting and accepting that some vendors will make some assumptions, and that's fine, because you are probably going to, as a vendor, come in and assume that yes, you're going to have that type of connector into HMS because 7 out of your 10 clients do, and that's fine. We can kind of work around that, and it's kind of accepting that there is kind of going to be that element to it.
So I think we're probably giving a recommendation there on, like, if you're going to get your vendors onto calls, like, think about proper use cases. Like, yes, detail all your requirements, but give them the opportunity to really understand what's unique about you and your organisation.
But I think also giving them the understanding of your organisation and the kind of the use cases, but also a little bit of flexibility to then for the vendors to present in the way that they want to. Remember, there was use cases that you guys gave, and actually one of them we were like, we're not going to focus too much time on that because we didn't necessarily want to propose it in that way or whatever. So, but you guys were very welcoming to that. So I think it's giving the use cases and the information, but allowing the space for them to...
It's still meeting that basic requirement that we're looking for. So we're kind of, you're meeting the requirement and you're actually delivering in terms of, well, this is what they're asking, can this tool deliver? And you're still doing that. You're still kind of ticking those boxes and meeting that requirement that's needed.
For me, thinking about what people could take away from this episode and your process, one of the differences about your team was the openness to work with the vendor and not hide information. So many companies we speak to don't give us the full story, and it's almost like,
Why would they not?
Then
That's
don't,
weird,
then don't
right?
expect a good pitch. Don't expect a pitch of a tool that's going to work for you.
but the right business case as well.
Yeah.
Like, how can you articulate what smart recruiters can bring to a business unless you let that company in to understand Greene King? And I think that's well, that for me was the synergy between Greene King and smart recruiters, was that partnership approach. Once you've gone through and vetted out some of the other vendors, you're really transparent about, hey, we need you to show us this. Bring that to life, and let's work on that. So that was good. We're just moving the conversation on a little bit, because conscious of time. You talk about lessons learned, and you've got a list you're sharing next week. Can we get some insight?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Specifically to this project about your lessons learned.
So we are pulling together all of the project team next week. We're doing a proper
Next Wednesday.
lessons learned meeting. We were going to do it earlier, and we decided to wait for volume to roll out. So I think for me, my big lessons learned are the voice of the business. That's my biggest one. Around if you're in a complex organisation that's similar size to what Greene King is, you can't really pin that on one person. You need to get a bit of confidence through either listening groups or testing rounds, and having some real accountability of a process owner to be in the meetings and show up. And a lot of what happened for us, because the pubs world are so busy, is it fell to the HR like directorship, so the people that were the process owners. And I remember on our go for volume Hungry Horse, I think you were on holiday that day actually. Sorry, Hungry Horse is one of the brands. That was that was the first phase. And like, we've done all this stuff, we're ready, we've done everything's green, we've done the prep, we've done the cutover, and then it was, well, what do the business say? Are they ready? Like, they're the ones that need to take this. And we were like, well,
and I think
they're ready. We're being told they're ready, but it was all like,
it was top down
via.
and not bottom up. It was top down and not bottom up. I think a huge lesson learned is let's go bottom up. Definitely.
Better voice of the customer, like, and a route through.
Yep.
To do a bit of myth busting, actually, because sometimes that can cause chaos when actually everything was all right and we were a go, but
No,
we didn't know what
from
we
a
didn't
project, putting the project kind of hat back on, that wasn't through the art of trying. I think we could have challenged better when we wanted to get out to do those kind of focus groups and those community sessions to go bottom up.
Yeah.
So it was that challenge. No, pubs are very busy at the time, and yes, they were, but we could challenge a little bit more here.
Yeah. And then my second is data. I thought we had nailed making our baseline surveys, creating our own data. Like, I would show off about this. Like, yeah, we went and made our own data. It's great. But all of a sudden, we've rolled out hourly paid team member recruitment, and I'm not really clear on what we feel is a good adoption target, because we've not invested enough time in, well, the investment we've put in means that we need this many pubs using it by this date. We focus too much on, like, how will it give them time back? How will it mean that they get the right candidates? How does it increase diversity?
Which is fair.
Yeah, so we put a load of data points in, but I think if you can do anything, put an adoption target in. And the reason I think you need it in your business case is because the board, who will always support you on it, if it's in a business case, that's how you hold the business accountable. Because ultimately we can't force them to use the technology.
Okay.
Like,
That's true. I think for me, lessons learned is, I think the two standouts for me are probably personnel focused, or kind of team member type of focused on the project. And one is ensuring that your kind of key project team are immersed into the company, so they kind of understand, so that they're not coming into it and it's not just at that level, they're not heavily reliant on or taking the word as what the SMEs are saying is exactly gospel. So actually, be immersed into that world a little bit before. I'll have time to be immersed into that world of Greene King before.
So they can say their own
exactly
thoughts
and understand it. So they can say their own thoughts. They can understand what people are saying and kind of move forward with that and say, actually, what you're saying, yes, that is true because I've seen that, I've believed that, and witnessed that. Or they can challenge and say, well, actually, no, I witnessed something different. Is that right? We didn't have that at that type of level. So it's very much kind of SME level. It would
come to me in discussions.
It would. So I'd come to you thinking, well, I don't know the answer to this one because I've only been here kind of 3 months. Or I'd go to the SMEs and I'd have to just what they would say to me, I'd have to believe. And I'm not saying that they weren't telling the truth, of course, but it was only one voice because it was the SME early days on the project before we could have that validation. So then when you go to the business to say, we're looking to validate this, it's, well, actually, no, it's not right. That what you've got such a small kind of cohort of area that may do like that may do it this way, but everything else is
so your handoff points then, so how we onboard the project team.
The second one for me, something that I've thought about quite heavily this week, purely because we've got the lessons learned next week, and that is a member of the project team that I think was missing or overlooked.
Oh, interesting.
Oh,
And that
Lindsay.
This is an
exclusive.
This is exclusive.
And I'm not going to lie, I hadn't saved this just for this meeting. But
No, you can say that you did.
No.
Okay,
He's
say
gonna
world
say that.
exclusive,
He's
but
gonna
not
say
World
that.
exclusive. I've saved it. So
The head of needs to butt out more because they did my head in.
no, far from it. No. Yeah, these little what did you call them? Idea
Idea
bombs.
bombs.
Idea bombs. Yeah, no pain in the
For
ass.
every
but
10 million, there's one that's good.
there is. Yeah, I'm close to 10 million. Yeah, it is. And there was 10 million. No, there was.
Chris, who was missing?
tell
I
me.
can't wait any
like,
longer.
Are you ready?
Gossip.
Are you ready? So, for me, it would be some form of data analysis on the project,
Oh,
whether it be
I
part
really agree with
time.
you.
So it's
the
like
bit
a
that-
part-time data analysis on there. So not just for the benchmarking data, but for everything. So on the project team as a whole, have got some great skills, fantastic skill sets, and I think everybody will turn around and say where their areas of weaknesses are on that project. And without kind of blowing my own trumpet, everyone's weakness, apart from me, would probably be Excel and BI dashboards.
And
I
data
can
and how
do
to
that.
get
And the data,
stuff out,
that is one of my skill sets.
Yeah.
However, my full-time job has also been implementing this, working with the SMEs, understanding kind of what's needed.
Yeah.
I haven't had the physical time to be able to then go and produce that kind of data analysis. Where if we had that skill set on the team, and it
And
might
Chris,
not have been a full-time
Should
role.
that have been in the business analyst role though? That we probably didn't. We had
Maybe.
we had a quarter of time
we
with a
did,
business analyst.
but I don't know if that skill set was there in that
okay.
role. That's what I mean. So everyone has
Yeah.
got some great skills to the team, and everyone is openly admits that where they don't have the skills, and that's fine. Of course they do, and I think we probably needed somebody, and it may only have had to have been 10 hours a week on that project that were dedicated to that was just all about producing that data analysis for us.
Yeah,
That's fair.
agree. It's a really good one.
Okay. Anything else,
I'm
Lindsay,
nervous
that you... I know, I was worried about who you'd left out.
No, so it wasn't no.
So
Not a big
overall,
bombshell.
you would say that a lot goes into it, but you need a community around you. You need that sort of forward planning to almost pitch the idea before you pitch the idea and have people pick apart the plan before you launch it.
And I know it's really overwhelming, and this is probably my final piece of advice, but don't just go after the technology, because our other biggest lesson is we probably not put enough into our selection practices, and we're seeing now that we should have done something different there in the build to get ready for how we select talent. So if you've got the ability to have multi work streams in your resourcing strategy, think about what your important ones are and think about what really get enabled by your tech.
And what are those important ones for you?
For us, so technology was the main work stream. Then we had inclusive hiring and we had talent attraction. So if you think about the fact that everyone just thinks we fill jobs, the reality is that there's a whole other work area now in the talent acquisition space that do recruitment marketing, targeting, campaign and talent sourcing. We had a big track on that because the basics had to be in. And because we put the basics in parallel, when we switched the tech on, James was like, at last I can do things that I need to be able to do.
We had nothing.
Because we'd already done let's think about what's foundational in talent attraction.
Okay.
But then that moves us on to the next. But then it's like those kind of selection processes.
Yeah.
And kind of how you
We
get
missed that
from
one.
new applicant to interview, and then from interview to offered and hired, and everything in between. And what are those what's that selection criteria and selection tools?
If I have to ask this question.
Here it comes.
'Cause
You know that the
it's
podcast
Go
is
on.
coming to the end.
When you ask
because
this question.
This question's coming.
So, and you guys, you've already got an advantage of this question.
I'd forgotten about this question
I
as well.
forgot the question.
Yeah, I just remembered what it is.
This is what we should have prepared for on the train here.
This is, you could have prepared your exclusive answer.
I could have done. This is why I should have watched the first one.
So, if you had a magic wand you could cast it, and it could be if you were going back through your HR transformation process or something for you to move forward with, you cast one wish to have something new, change something. What would each of you have?
Also, I think
Data analyst on the project.
so. I would say I'd have a connector to a HRIS for us in Greene King, because I think that would solve a heck of a lot. Just in the world of talent acquisition, I really get frustrated with the inability for us to hire people and know where they're going next. Like, it really frustrates me. Everyone talks about careers and talent management, and I know there's tech out there that can do it, but there's no way right now for us to know that I hire Chris today and he's going to go and be a, I don't know, technical superstar in
Data analyst.
He's going to be a data analyst.
Also, it's like the skills that person's have to then progress them on for their
It's
future.
infinite now, isn't it? Like, you hire, people leave, then you replace them. Like, if we could figure out, well, instead of them leaving, where do we think is the best place for them, and they don't actually know themselves, then we'll get better retention.
I find that really
Probably
interesting.
doing myself out of a job if that fixes, though.
It's very interesting, Lindsay, because you know how to hook people in. And I would almost argue that it's the role of somebody else to retain that hook. So you could maybe teach your business a trick or two about what it was that hooked Chris in and how you keep that hook slightly in. And so many businesses don't retain it.
Yeah. They're probably quite just transactional with interview process, and then
There's that.
You
people
would
get
be,
sat in a
though, as
seat
like-
and they
as
forget
a-
about them a little bit, maybe.
As a pub manager, and we've kind of mentioned it throughout this episode, people are so busy. As a manager of a pub, I've got to do this and this. It might be December. It's going to be
So
busy.
task-driven.
All I want to
Yeah.
do is get people in and have interviews. And then when they're in, all you want to do is make sure that they're there on time. They're doing this. So it'd be really hard, I reckon, to...
But the enterprise businesses look at something like Lindsay said and think, oh, I need technology to sort that out. You can't retain people without the right people as well.
Yeah.
And you just think, oh, the tech will have a talent
You're right,
marketplace.
It's a behavioural thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So for me, it would be, I think it would definitely be looking at the selection process around our whole onboarding piece, or our pre-boarding. Maybe I probably should say that. So it's kind of in that stage just before they've joined, maybe even kind of after they've joined, certainly in the pub world, and how we could kind of factor that and use the technology better for that. So it's something that we're kind of trying to look at kind of after the event. But I think if we'd have touched on that earlier and brought that into the project, I think that would have been a huge enabler and a huge hook for our pubs to kind of use that even more and drive that adoption even more.
Okay. Well, we're out of time, Ames. We've done it. We've got them in again.
Got them in.
We've smashed it, I think.
See you in 2 months.
Or it's going to be a mashup. A podcast mashup.
No,
that's
it's
coming.
been great. And it's so, I think one of the things that I will take away from this conversation and other conversations that we've had with you guys is just how you just build such a great community internally, externally with the vendors, and how we really felt, even when we were going on the journey with them, we felt with you on it. And I just think it's just so refreshing to hear how you're bringing other people's thoughts and opinions and onto the journey, rather than, right, this is the system we're going with, this is how you're going to implement it, and this is when it's going to be live. It's just a different perspective.
I would have got that wrong if we
usually
did
hit.
that.
Definitely. There's a lot of people can take about building the business case.
Yeah.
So hopefully they got some insight from this. I think you guys would both be open to being approached to discuss
Absolutely.
it and the
100%.
involvement,
Yeah.
what it
100%.
takes. So, but we're really thankful for having you guys on. So thank you.
It's been
Thank
really
you
fun.
very much,
you.
guys.
Thanks
No,
a
it has
lot.
been for lots of fun. Thank you.